So let me start. Yeah, hello everyone. Happy New Year. So it's really great to have you all together here in such a great exchange and such an outlook for the next year. And it's really a pleasure to talk to the three of you because you all have complete different point of views, of course, and also perspectives on what's going on in procurement. And so it's really cool, of course, starting with the lady first, having Charlotte here, Charlotte de Brabandt. It's really cool because, of course, you have so many insights about what happens in corporate life, what happens in international, confederation, basically, what happens in procurement from a very global perspective. This is really amazing having you. Then we have James Meads. James is, so you could see it on his shirt, is running a website called procurementsoftware.site, and especially running very successful and amazing podcast, and is an expert in digitalization and procurement. And it's really cool to have you as well, James. Then we have...
Thank you, Andreas. Good to be here.
Then we have Mathias Bosse with a complete different view on things happening on procurement. Mathias is pretty successful investor for a longer time and is also running a platform called scm-startups.com. And especially has a view on what's going on with startups in terms of supply chain management, but also in particular on procurement. And it's really also really great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Okay, so this was a pretty short introduction for everyone, but of course we have a bit more time, and it would be cool, of course, if you get some more insights about what you do and what is very interesting to learn about you. And so, Charlotte, so stage is yours. Maybe you have two minutes. Tell us a bit about who you are, what you do, and what is very interesting about you.
Absolutely. Well, Andreas, thank you for having me. It always is a true honor. So I remember we met at the Procurement Summit like 5 years ago, and since then already so much has happened. So I've worked across 3 different continents in the field of procurement and supply chain, and had the big honor to also change within 5 different industries. Starting in automotive, and then I moved progressively into procurement of timepieces, pharma, consumer goods, medical devices, and currently I just moved into a new role last year, specializing on the digital side of procurement. And we cannot deny it, technology is all around us. So I thought there would be no better time than now to educate myself on it even more. And yeah, I have had the passion already over the past 12 years to contribute to our profession by writing articles, by establishing my own procurement YouTube channel, giving talks at various conferences around the globe, and trying to give back to our profession, trying to mostly also motivate our next generation. And that's really my mission in life, is to be an inspiration to our next generation and let them also get inspired by us thought leaders. Yeah. So I think, I bring the whole industry knowledge, but also a great deal of passion to this table.
That's pretty cool. So just one thing. So you're also member of the ISM Thought Leadership Council. So this is pretty interesting. So what are you doing there?
Oh, absolutely. So the ISM Thought Leadership Council, it stands for the Institute for Supply Management. And I am one of their trainers in procurement and supply chain, and speakers and ambassadors. And back in 2017, when I won the 30 Under 30 award as the first European winner in their history of winning on behalf of all of the 30 Under 30, they allowed me to join that exclusive circle. It's a roundtable that happens once a month, every 2 months, where we have C-levels joining globally, all procurement, and we discuss these future trends, future topics, and truly what inspires industry. What are the pain points? What are best practices? So I get to be mixing right in that little circle of industry professionals.
I'm curious to learn about your discussions about that. So thank you so much. James, please tell us a bit about yourself. So who you are, why are living in Sofia, which is of course an amazing place to be, and why, what is interesting to learn about you?
Yeah, Charlotte put the bar pretty high there. So yeah, my background is I'm a procurement guy through and through. I started out also in the automotive industry. I started out with Jaguar Land Rover, and then throughout my career, then I worked for a couple of tier one automotive suppliers. One of those facilitated a move to Germany, so I actually spent most of my professional career living in Germany. Then after the 2008-2009 recession, I decided I wanted to work in an industry that was a bit more recession proof. And as COVID has shown us, everybody needs toilet paper. So I went to go and work for a company that makes toilet paper, among other things. And that led me to move into the indirect space. So I've done sort of CapEx, MRO, logistics, facilities management, done pretty much most of the indirect space when it relates to a manufacturing environment. I've not done sort of marketing, IT, professional services, that type of thing. And as part of that, I mean, I work for two consumer goods companies. One of them resulted in me spending a bit of time out in Africa, in Nigeria, which was an interesting place to go. Very, very different to Europe, as you can probably imagine. And then, yeah, at the end of 2018, I made the decision. I didn't have a huge mortgage, and I didn't have kids to pay through university. So I thought, why not go and start my own business? And that's ultimately what led me to ending up here, really, in Bulgaria. I wanted to take advantage of location independence and some of the advantages that geo arbitrage can bring with that. So from a cost of living and tax perspective, it's very attractive out here. Plus, it's only an hour and a half from a ski resort as well, which is always nice. So I mean, I do a little bit of freelance consulting, but the main project that I'm working on at the moment is launching procurementsoftware.site, which will be a directory of procurement tech companies with a specific focus towards mid-market businesses, because most of what is out there now in terms of content and sort of competition is mainly aimed at sort of enterprise level Fortune 1000 businesses.
Great to have you, James. Yeah, moving to Matthias. So of course, complete different perspective on that whole topic. So it's really amazing to have you here. What is interesting to know about Matthias?
Yeah, so thank you first of all for the invitation. Really cool to be part of this group, because as you said, I'm coming from a totally different angle, having a very strong finance background. So actually, I started out my career once in logistics, but then went into consulting. And for the last 9 years, I've been in tech startups and working for 2 different venture capital funds. In which I then from 2019 onwards focused on the topic of supply chain management, because I found this really particularly interesting, and being at the backbone of our economy. And as latest that COVID has shown everyone, it's really a super crucial space to be in. And technology is about to transform this segment as well, right? As you said, from 2019 on, we started to look into this field, and together with a partner, I then established scm-startups.com, which is our small endeavor to monitor and screen the space and find interesting startups from supply chain. And that's also procurement is for sure a very big part of it, right? So we do a lot of reports. We published our supply chain startup handbook last year, profiling more than 200 startups from the space. And from the beginning of this year on, we also want to focus a bit more even on the space, only investing in supply chain. And so we are about to establish our own small investment business in that field. And as Charlotte put it, so we can't deny it. Technology is around, and super interesting for the years and decades to come, I would say.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having you, Matthias. By the way, I can really recommend downloading the handbook. So it's really very interesting one. And of course, it's also for free. So you can just go to the website and just download it. Am I wrong?
Yes, no, it's correct. So, yeah. So we are about to publish our next bigger report, which is on supply chain management startups from the sustainability sector. But so I think we'll speak about that later.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, of course, I think, of course, COVID changed a lot. during the last years, especially in procurement. Of course, we all know what's going on when you want to buy a new car. So it's really difficult. You just don't get any chips. And so we have so many problems in the supply chain those days, and the pandemic is also taking some time. So of course, it would be an amazing opportunity right now to get your knowledge and look into the future of 22 and think about what will happen most probably in 22. What will be the huge topics that also procurement will and of course also needs to focus on. And of course, there was a nice article that we shared with you prior to this. And of course, it's an interesting one. There's 10 different topics described, but I think you have a complete different mindset on this and see the world completely different than maybe on these in this article with these 10 different topics. So of course, so I asked before we come together here, I ask every one of you, okay, please name the 3 from your perspective, most important things, what will happen in procurement. And the first question will be, who has not sustainability on the list of its 3 things? Okay, maybe we should start here because if you're dealing with procurement those days, I think if you're in all these conversations, I think Charlotte might know much better than me, but I think 60%, let's say, of the discussions we currently see is about sustainability. And so how do you see things, Charlotte?
Well, thank you for that question. I'm so glad to be starting this conversation because I just had it burning already on my tongue. So actually just a couple of years ago, I used to live in Switzerland, and for my previous employer, they were based in the field of consumer goods, pharma, medical devices. I relocated to the US, to the headquarters, to join the Center of Excellence of Supplier Sustainability. And that was actually in parallel when our CEO made a global commitment that 80% of the global supplier base will be sustainable. And already then, people started to see the emergence, the importance. And we were thinking, okay, we would like to have that goal. Thinking backwards, how can we establish that goal? What are the mechanisms that you can measure sustainability, supplier sustainability in particular? And who are the big players that we can partner with in that field? So I would say back then it was successively becoming more important within companies, and many companies they didn't know about measuring that sort of grid back then, but now it's in everyone's ear, everyone's mouth. You read it, it's all over, and it's not new anymore. So I think the importance has increased over the past couple more up to 4 years. But now it's more important than ever because of the new factor. When you're in procurement, you don't necessarily just focus on the price, the quality any longer, or other aspects. Sustainability has become one of the success factors. And I know that from my previous experience working in the industry, we do pay attention whether someone has some sort of, I don't want to make any advertisements here, but any sort of EcoVadis assessment or CDP assessment. It is important because like this, you can start to measure whether they have passed the assessment or not, whether they have even thought about certain assessments. So this is one of the, we cannot deny it. It has grown in importance. And looking at it now from a digital standpoint, looking at the future, for example, James talked about MRO, one of my favorite topics, how to digitize MRO through marketplaces, and their sustainability has also become a big factor which has grown there. So that's why I put it on one of my top trends, one of my top lists, out of my personal, I would say, experience, and having seen how you want to achieve a goal and how can you start a sustainable procurement program, how can you implement it, and how can you measure the success afterwards.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so absolutely agree. And if I may, I would like to add to this more from a startup perspective, or founders starting businesses in that field, right? So that of course offers so many opportunities. It's first of all the solutions that are actually measuring your own business, right, in terms of providing those information, but more in the sense of procurement. So I think all the procurement departments and professionals, so they need scalable technology. They need technological solutions to implement those processes into their daily business lives, right? And I think here especially comes into play what also procurement software is about, to really make those solutions available, right? Because I think if I think back some years, so for sure the topic was somehow on the agenda and everyone was somehow caring about it. It was maybe a bit of more of marketing than really implemented in the day-to-day processes. But now the pressure is piling up, and people need to do something. They need solutions to do that, right? And they rarely build them on their own. So they're looking for those solutions that are out there, and a lot of great startups and also established companies can provide those solutions, but you need to find them, right? And you need to understand what they can do. And also, if you then start to implement those solutions, the other side, so the suppliers and all the partners involved, they need to provide these information, right? And they have to generate those information sometimes on their own also, right? So they need also solutions how to measure their own business and how to provide those information to others that might be interested, and to take that into consideration for their procurement decisions and processes. So I think this so maybe the best time to start a procurement business these days.
Yeah, I think technology, just to add to what Matthias said, I think technology is going to be a key part of it. I'm both excited and also concerned, perhaps in equal measure, about this whole phenomenon, because I think on the one hand, clearly we have to do something. We have to, as business owners or as employees in procurement teams, we have to do something about this huge problem that's galloping towards us. I mean, I think from an opportunity perspective, keep it simple. Let's start with the easy stuff. You know, there's a lot of sustainability activities that we can do that directly impact the bottom line. And I'm thinking specifically, there was a startup that I met at Procurement Summit last year, Ship Zero, that are measuring transport emissions and are helping companies to optimize their loads or to choose the right modes of transport for their shipping requirements, which I think is brilliant. You know, the logistics industry is notoriously, you know, analog still in many of its operations. So, you know, just doing something simple like that, making sure that your shipping containers are full where possible, or making sure that your trucking company uses the shortest route, or even substituting diesel for electric trucks in areas where it makes economic sense, where you're not getting a lot of your electricity from coal-fired power stations, for example. I think they're the little things that we can do. Energy savings. You know, I worked in the paper industry for many years. Energy savings was a massive one, and it directly impacted the bottom line. Mm-hmm. Investing in good manufacturing processes, so as you're consuming less consumable spare parts, you know, again, it adds to the environment. It creates, it helps the environment. It creates less waste, and it's a direct impact to the bottom line. The part that concerns me somewhat is that I fear that we may be sleepwalking towards more bureaucracy and governance and legislation in this regard that puts big business at an unfair advantage and that punishes the small guy. Because if you're a manufacturing business of 20 people, you're not going to have the same resources as Unilever put out there often as being a poster child on sustainability. They've got massive resources. They've got an army of consultants and lawyers that they can throw at this. So I just think that we need to be careful. And I think that we need to make sure that we look at any certification criteria and any certification bodies with a critical eye to make sure that we're not falsely accrediting pretty dirty companies with environmental certification that don't necessarily deserve it. You know, it's I use the old story of, you know, a bottled water manufacturer that puts solar panels on top of one of their factories and then claims to be green. Well, not really. So I think we just need to be very, very careful in terms of some of the PR that goes out there from some of these companies.
Yeah. So yes, of course, we need to be really careful also with greenwashing around sustainability. And of course, there are many things around which where you see, all right, okay, it's funny that you focus on sustainability, but the core of your business is anything but sustainable. And sometimes this is a bit weird about having these real greenwashing in that area. So of course, sustainability is not a new topic. So it's there for many years already. And so in the past, as far as I perceived it, when it comes to, okay, I need to pay something for that. Okay, let's then focus on the price. Let's forget about the sustainability for the moment. Currently, we can afford this. So the question is, does this trend sustainability, will it be sustainable? So will this also be a long-lasting trend? And do you think the companies are really willing to pay for this?
So if I may start, I would answer that question with a clear yes. So I think this is absolutely here to stay, and I think this question has also been discussed, looking from an investor's perspective, to be quite honest. So I think this has been discussed for years or even a decade or so, whether this is a nice to have and something you can market, but it's not really going to be relevant for business. And I think this has completely changed over the last 2 to 3 years. So being an absolutely must-have topic you have to deal with, and it's becoming so relevant as a dimension. So in general, right, and being considered in so many decisions, whether it is procurement, whether it is manufacturing, whether it's something else, providing your services, managing your business. And so I think from so many directions, the forces are pushing and pulling on that topic. So consumers demanding a lot of those things. Big investors like KKR and others are making this an absolutely prerequisite to receive funding to deal with those topics and have policies established around that, and considering it in every of your critical business decisions. So from that perspective, I would say yes. So let's hear what the others have to say about it.
If I may add, yes, the force will be there. It will continue to go forward. But there will be mid-sized companies who will not have the budget simply for all these assessments, because they are not cheap to do them constantly. And I know that when I introduced with my team the whole supplier sustainability program, we had companies that said, we simply don't have that budget set aside for that big assessment, nor the resources and time. And I had to actually call up suppliers to explain to them the importance of this program, of this assessment. And we actually offered to pay the first assessment for each supplier for them, and depending how seriously they took it, depending how much information they provided for that assessment, they could have had a validity from 1 to 3 years. Furthermore, that assessment could then also be valid for other companies. So there is this, so that's how we tried to enable, how we try to convince companies by not making the whole budget an excuse.
I think just adding to this, I think having a good measurement is one thing, but I think the decision out of this measurement could be very expensive, because of course this means that a company who is not that sustainable, but has a lower price, you can't take them anymore and you lose money. And the question is, of course, always, we as a sourcing startup, we are of course very much within the discussion. And sometimes I really hear from CPOs, yeah, so that's all good. It's good to know about sustainability, but we can't pay €1 more. And then it's all right. So great having this measurement, but basically it needs to be really core of the company as I see it. Of course, the CEO needs to judge, saying, all right, this is worth to me so much. And I think then really it gets an anchor also in the company and really also gets sustainable.
And just to add, lastly, that's why it's about the partnership. We have a program. The suppliers are important to us, so that's why we called them, educated them, and how can we be of service so they can have these assessments in place? How can we support them? And trying to help them to get these assessments, not by paying, of course, the assessment, but then also supporting them to achieve the goals they desire.
Great. Any more additions to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, I think, yes, it's here to stay, but I think at the moment we've maybe not come to the real sort of understanding, certainly at a CFO level, of how much is this going to cost, and how do we finance it? I think everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet that it's the right thing to do and we need to do something, but I still think that a lot of the long-term costs and benefits are not as transparent as they need to be. And I read a study, I think it was actually from Germany, that when they interviewed a bunch of senior executives and they asked them, is sustainability important? And they all said yes. And then when they asked them a binary question, is sustainability more important than price, or is sustainability more important than quality, it sort of floated down towards the bottom of the list of priorities. So I think there does need to be a bit more clarity around, in the long term, what are the costs, what are the benefits? I genuinely think that when we take the low-hanging fruit, there's a clear benefit to most businesses just through them being leaner and more efficient. But there will inevitably be costs. I think the other thing that we need to be careful of is that not everybody is living in this metropolitan bubble, and there will be people that struggle to buy their groceries every week, and if they're having to pay a premium so as they're using recyclable materials for packaging, for example, then that can push the price up of things. So there has to be a way that it can be done in the most market-driven manner as possible, rather than just imposing regulations and green taxes on people.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much on this. So, of course, I want to come to the next topic, and I'm pretty interested if there's such a big overlap again. So, who wants to come up with the second topic, which is on his 3-topic list? Any suggestion?
Well, I can go ahead. For me, the second topic was cybersecurity and risk. Reason being, I mean, there are so many endless studies, and I give talks on this topic because, especially in procurement and supply chain, we've seen such an increase of fraud, threats, especially now during COVID, how it started, a lot of cyber breaches. And we need to definitely be aware that there are a lot more cyber security disciplines, guidelines necessary. We need to educate our workforce. We need to also educate our partners, because I think it's not only about making sure that our company is safe, but it's actually the vendors, the suppliers that we collaborate with. And depending, they may not have, again, the budget necessarily to have a whole risk program in place, but they are the ones who may be the biggest threat to us if we let them in. And they and I think it's a matter of really establishing these security guidelines, controls, training, and having these procedures in place. So I think this is something that will be on everyone's agenda. If not yet now, it will be very soon, but I'm sure it is right now already. I mean, we've seen tremendous amount of fraud, of increases since, I think, more than ever since COVID started.
Yeah, so true. So I would, so to be honest, so that was really hard to decide for the top 3, because so especially this topic is, I think that it's relevant for all industries, right? And also especially for small and mid-sized companies, even more than for the big ones, because they have a lot more resources to deal with those topics, and especially with smaller or mid-sized companies, this is somehow something you have to do on the side as well, right? So that is something that comes as an add-on, but for sure it's especially relevant for supply chain, with so many partners, with this network of partners and so many interfaces and potential weak points where that can be attacked, right? So absolutely, I would absolutely agree. And it's, for me, it was a bit difficult to decide whether I should put it under the whole topic of risk and resilience, and somehow making the system future-proof and really stable and more resilient to threats and external shocks. But for sure, so super important topic. And unfortunately, I would say with a lot of companies, still something, as I said, so, okay, we have to deal with that also, but okay, it's not the super highest priority. And I think that needs to be highlighted a bit more. I'm not sure whether this is true for all European countries, but But especially in Germany, I think there's also legislation underway bringing this to the attention of top management and making it really a top priority for these guys. Yeah, so but I would like to add, I think, as with what James just said with regard to sustainability, so that's also increasing costs, right? So the system is super complex and it's getting more complex, and doing all this, so someone has to bear the cost at the end. So, and unfortunately, that's all of us, I would say.
but Matthias, it's easier to invest and pay these costs rather than paying the frauds afterwards. And then you have lawsuits and brand damage and privacy damage and you name it. So better sometimes to make that step of investment rather than suffering the consequences afterwards.
Yes.
I think,
yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm with you on that one, Charlotte. I talk a lot about procurement data and how bad material master and vendor master data is in most organizations. And when we talk about cleaning up procurement data, it's like it's an investment. It's not a cost. It's just like building a high-speed train system. You know, you may not see the immediate ROI, but it's a long-term investment. And you completely echo your sentiments on that. Security is just the same. But as I said on sustainability, there are very simple measures that companies can take to take some basic steps, like, you know, training employees to understand what phishing emails look like, because that's often, you know, the easiest way of attack is through the weakest point, and that's often an employee that's not really very savvy around what a phishing email looks like, or hacking someone's mobile device. So yeah, it's there are small steps that even businesses that don't have a huge budget can do.
Yeah, I think it could be a very, very short-term ROI on cybersecurity. So if you're not investing here, so that's for sure. So Matthias, what is your top two?
Yeah, so my top two is somehow related to a number of topics we just touched on, right? Like resilience and so on. I think I see a lot of very interesting startups coming out also from the whole space of, let's call it collaboration, so supplier collaboration, and that goes, from my perspective at least, so hand in hand also with all the topic about tracking and tracing, visibility, knowing what your supply chain is looking like. And I think this is something, so although this industry is so old and also there is a lot of technique, right? But at the end, so companies don't have the full visibility of who is their the supplier of their suppliers, how does the supply chain look like, where does it all end up, looking at chips, etc. So ending up at more or less a bunch of handful of producers in the end, maybe. But I think making this more transparent and collaborating throughout the supply chain, I think this is, from my perspective, one of the super important topics, because you can't really do all the things we just talked about, measuring and evaluating how sustainable is your supply chain and how sustainable are you as a company. If you don't have this information, you need to have the full visibility. In an ideal world, you would have the full transparency and visibility throughout your supply chain. And that's not only meaning that you know when are goods transported from one point to the other, but also all this background information, who is supplying to whom, how is this company dealing with sustainability and all these different topics. I think this is one of my major topics, not so maybe for this year, but I think also for the next year and the year after.
Yeah. So of course, Charlotte is working for the leading e-commerce company in the world. I think this has, of course, the best visibility I can imagine, as at least in the e-commerce world, about what's happening with all my transfers. And you can see, all right, the shipment is just coming all three stops away. And I can imagine there's much more to come, isn't it, Charlotte?
Oh, absolutely. It's just the beginning, and it's a matter of benchmarking, best practice sharing, and that's why these conversations are just so useful. Just this exchange to see what is it that the industry wants and what is it that we can put the most resources in to make sure that we cover the most important bits. I mean, it's not perfect yet, but I think it's if not now, this is probably the most advanced that we've ever been. If you look at the history of procurement supply chain and the amount of progress we've made just within the last couple of years is equivalent to probably the last 10 years before that. So I think it's really just starting.
Thank you so much for these insights.
It's incredible, isn't it? You've got on the one hand an example like Charlotte from a huge global retailer, and then you've got procurement that is still trying to manage this in large corporates to a large extent through an ERP system or through technology that looks and feels like it was programmed on a Friday afternoon. It's almost like you've got one person playing Fortnite, and then the next guy sat next to him playing Sonic the Hedgehog. It's like night and day.
Yeah. So we also do nice software on Friday afternoons, by the way. But James, what is your top two?
I'm probably going to be quite predictable, but I think number one is going to be digitization, with a recognition that, and it kind of leads on to my other one, which is around the rise of the contingent workforce.
So let's start with one first. So just let's go through this. So let's start with digitization. So of course.
So I mean, you've got a scenario now that procurement has always been a pretty lean function. We don't have the same amount of resource that sales do. We don't have a large number of admin assistants to do a lot of our spade work. So I think there is a recognition, and it was recognized in the Deloitte CPO survey, that the procurement professional or procurement leader's priority number one is increasing operational efficiency. And there are three ways that you can do that. You can either get rid of unnecessary processes, you can eliminate them. Like, why do I need to fill out a travel request when I need to take a business trip? Just give me a budget like an adult and let me manage it. It's a pointless piece of bureaucracy. Why do we need it? Just get rid of it. It's a waste of my time. If you're paying me a six-figure salary, you don't need me to fill out a form when I want to take a 200 euro flight. So eliminate is one. You can delegate work to more junior members of staff, but in procurement teams, you often have quite a flat structure. You may have a senior buyer that works under a category manager, but you don't tend to have an army of administrative support like perhaps sales or HR does. So then you're left with automating it, which is the other one. And I think that certainly in terms of bang for your buck, that's where the easy wins are going to come from, because most people think procurement digitalization and they think of the 2 or 3 enterprise level suites that they've heard of that tend to sponsor every conference that you go to. But the reality is that the world is much, much bigger than that. And you can get a pretty good tech stack, especially if you're a mid-sized business, for less than $100,000 or euro. You can have a couple of good systems that will speak to each other. So if you can get to the point, and I'm going to quote the Spice Girls here, but if you can get to the point of knowing what you really, really want in terms of the end solution, if you're an automotive company and you're spending 80% of your spend on direct materials, then you probably don't need a really technical contract lifecycle management system. If you're a financial institution where most of your spend is on professional services, then you probably do. So it's really getting to that point of understanding what can give you the best bang for your buck among the tech space and understanding what's out there. And then you can really drive some efficiencies through that and have, well, and just free up procurement professionals' time. The average procurement professional, I would estimate, certainly from my experience, spends between a third and a half of their time on non-essential tasks. If you can automate or simplify a lot of that, then ergo you get more resources then that are driving savings or driving value or working on things like sustainability or SRM.
Right.
I completely agree. I mean, when I started in automotive, I spent hours just folding these POs, putting them into the envelope and sending them off the post. And I remember these times every day, just all the negotiations and then the paperwork. And okay, we've now proceeded into then fax, then emails. But altogether, it is still very much a manual process to a certain extent. If you have these, I would say, tail spend, these are ways how you can then easily automate that, use digitizing tools which are out there. Of course, there's no perfect tool, but they are very advanced tools and tools that can certainly help any sort of indirect tail spend element, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you won't be surprised that I have very much sympathies with this point, and yeah, great to hear that. So, Charlotte, what is your last one on your 3 points list?
Last one, without a doubt, supplier relationships. So I think if COVID showed us that we as procurement professionals, we cannot be the bad guys any longer. And I actually wrote a book about that. It's called, it just came out actually end of last year. It's Negotiation in Crisis Situations. And this book really illustrates that we cannot play this good guy, bad guy game anymore. We need to collaborate, build relationships with our suppliers. As procurement, we learned, if not now, if not before, then definitely now, that when you have a crisis mode and when the supplier only has 100 filters available, who will the supplier give these filters to? That procurement professional that only tried to reduce your price and treat you just like any number, or that procurement professional that actually had a conversation with you, that treated you like a human, who wanted to build a partnership with you, who listened to you, who went a journey with you. And I think this was definitely a wake-up call also for me, but also for our profession, that we are dependent on relationships. And I think this will be something that will be a very, very long-lasting, it will have a very long-lasting effect. I don't think it will ever disappear again, not having a relationship with your suppliers.
Yeah. Yeah, and it also goes very much in line with the role that procurement plays in a company. So what is the role? Is this just the fulfillment guys just getting things to the production line or whatever? Or is this really playing a role dealing with partners, building supply chains? And
together.
Yes, exactly. And this is, of course, goes very much in line with the new role where procurement moves into, basically.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I agree with Charlotte on that, but I do think that we need to be mindful of the fact that if we're doing supplier relationship management, inevitably we're going to do it with our key suppliers rather than all of them. I do think that has to go hand in hand with supplier rationalization or having an effective tail spend management solution, because you can have the best SRM in the world with your key suppliers, but if one of your tail spend vendors that supplies an essential spare part doesn't have a relationship with you and can't supply, then you kind of back to square one. So 100% agree, but I think managing tail spend is an integral part of that too.
Yes. So just continue, James. What is the third point on your list?
Yeah, my third one was sort of the rise of the contingent workforce and with remote work becoming more of a permanent, more of a permanent factor. I think it surprised me actually how slowly it's happening in the corporate world, but certainly in the tech industry, this whole geo arbitrage and using contingent workforce in either taking advantage of lower cost countries or better tax regimes, or just, for going back to cybersecurity, in terms of finding cybersecurity experts, just there aren't that many, and just having to search the world to find the ones that know enough about the topic. I think that will I did a podcast interview this morning actually with a couple of Swiss guys that have a contingent workforce tech platform to manage all of that from a regulatory perspective. I think we will see more and more platforms essentially being like Upwork or Fiverr, but for corporate organizations that will help to really grow that into an ecosystem. And I think some of these executive search and interim management agencies will probably find themselves out in the cold, and that model will start to disappear when people like myself realize that we can be sort of standalone businesses and go out and find our own work without having to go through some of these recruiters. So I think recruiters will have to adapt their model or potentially die if they're in the sort of interim space. Permanent recruitment, obviously, I think will continue as it is, but I think there will be an increasing acceptance to work across borders and across time zones to get the best talent at the best price.
Thank you for bringing this up. yeah, I think there's so many more things what are happening. So of course, we as a startup, I can just talk about us. We had really trouble finding people, finding new colleagues in Hamburg. It was really a struggle, and so we started moving on to other countries. And so currently we have great colleagues in Bulgaria, in Ukraine, in Tunisia, and so this is really cool, and it works really very well. Of course, you have to first of all get used to this kind of working, but when we did, it was really an experience, and it's really working great. And so we are just a little funny startup, and so the question is what will happen in the corporate world, and also with employee positions, with nobody would think about moving this to another country or just globalizing these functions. And I think there's so much room for movement there, and I think this will also very much affect procurement. Not just, okay, we outsource this complete topic, much more than this. So really having integrated worldwide teams, very much more. So I really completely agree with what you said.
Me too, and it's really that whole generation topic. Looking at currently, we have 4 main generations in the workforce, and each generation bringing different aspects to the table. And currently, it was interesting to read this fact that millennials, so that's me, we will, by the end of our journey, we will have changed the job 25 times.
Mm-hmm.
And then looking at the digital natives that are entering the workforce, just imagine that whole aspect. They are growing up with the computers, with the laptops, with tech. It's just different mindsets, and trying to understand the new generation. I feel that they are taking a lot more risks. And this morning, actually, the CEO from BlackRock also published an article that now it's the biggest ever boom of contingent workforce globally. People are resigning their jobs, becoming independent, or resigning their full-time job and wanting more contracts rather than a solid job. So you see, it's just a very different mindset. And respecting all these different generations. I mean, this is a very different topic, but this will leadership will have to change. Companies' mindsets will have to change. And being able to, as a leader, to maneuver these 4 generations and making all of the 4 generations still motivated, retaining them in the workforce, finding talent, as Andreas said. So exciting times.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It's already happening, isn't it, in professions where it's more of a seller's market. If you're a software developer, software developers that flatly refuse to work for anyone unless they can work on their own terms completely remotely. It's happening. Yeah.
So absolutely. So couldn't agree more here. And then maybe Andreas, you could also confirm this maybe. So it's hard to find this rare talent, right? And so this is maybe also one of the advantages that startups have, that they can be a bit more flexible. There is not a big organization in place. So in a lot of the companies I've invested in or I've seen in the last year, so being remote, or at least partly remote, is so it's totally normal, right? So there are only very few startups that run kind of a traditional model of having one office in one city and then trying to acquire employees in that for that office. So that's also kind of the advantage that they have. They can find talent everywhere in the world, and as James, as you said, there are a lot of good software solutions or service providers also that make that handleable, right? So it's not so tax-wise and social security-wise, etc. So there's scalable technology solutions to build your organization that way, and I think that's kind of absolutely getting normal, at least for software developers. I would say that's absolutely true, right? So you can find them everywhere, but not close to your home. And that's really cool, and I think that's also true for a lot of other professions and talents and qualifications which you might need for in supply chain, right? And for that reason, I think that's really super interesting times also.
Yeah, it's really a challenge. I think what we need to do is adapt, of course, also our culture. I think if you're very used to, okay, you sit in on one round on one table and you're discussing things, and then you have someone maybe with a camera. So this is all not working at all. This was really, so these hybrid things is really complicated, and this is really tough to make this happen. But if you're really used to this kind of culture working like this, I think then it works pretty well, and it goes much further than just only for the software development side. And of course, you can build full teams on all different areas, basically completely global. What we're looking for is mostly the time zone. Do we have enough overlap on the time zone that it's not too inconvenient to work with each other, for example? And so this is the kind of things we're looking for, but not where is the person located or something. So hey, be located wherever you like to. And the most important thing that we get something really great done.
Yeah.
But here,
I think hybrid.
What's your third topic? Sorry, James. Don't want to interrupt you. Just if you want to mention something here.
Yeah, I was just going to say with hybrid, I think that's it. You touched on a really interesting point there, because with hybrid, if someone is fully remote and they're working in sort of a more hybrid working structure, I think there does have to be a recognition that may affect their career progression and career development. And if they're mindful of that and they go into it with their eyes open and maybe look at, starting a couple of side hustles or making some money online, or doing a bit of investing to supplement, what they might lose through lack of quick career progression through lifestyle choice. It's just a lifestyle choice, isn't it, that they need to be mindful of as a result of that. But yeah, completely agree with what you were saying around time zone is important, but location not necessarily.
Yeah, great. So last try again. So Matthias, so of course you have the honor to close the round with your third topic of choice.
Yeah, so I think looking at the time we've already spent that, I think my third point would be pretty related to what James said earlier. So I think that's and that's maybe not only for procurement but also for procurement. It's the whole topic of automation, right? Whether it's processes in procurement, whether it's really movement of physical goods in warehouses, or even with self-driving trucks or whatever. So it's the whole topic of automation, making things more efficient, and by that also somehow mitigating all the effects we said earlier, right? Because so being more sustainable, taking other things into consideration, moving production maybe a bit nearer to consummation, and all things that tend to make things more expensive. They can somehow be mitigated with being more efficient on things, and that might be digital processes in procurement, that might be movement of goods, and that's why I think all this automation topic is super important for supply chain as a whole, and has ever been most probably. But I think so giving new techniques, I think this is becoming more relevant in the next years.
Okay, I see no disagreements.
Definite agreement. I wish we had top 4.
Okay, it was really a pleasure having you today. Was an amazing discussions. I learned a lot. Thank you so much for your time. I wish you personally all the best for the upcoming year, for all the challenges you're personally facing, and of course I really hope that it might be a really big success for you personally. Thank you so much for joining and learning that much from your side, and have a great one, and hopefully talk to you soon.
Yes, so
thank you, Andreas. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having us.
And good luck with mysupply. So really interested to maybe we can come together in a year from now and see whether our prognoses have become true, and where mysupply then stands.
Sounds pretty promising. Let's do so.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.